morning, everyone. I just realized I'm the guy who has to go right before lunch. So I will try and make it quick. Thanks to Crane, who actually went over a little of our time allotment because now my presentation can be shorter. But I'm James Calabaza. I come from New Mexico, a little small community called Santo Domingo Pueblo. I've been a transplant here to Colorado now for 13 years. Something about this place just made me stay, live up in Fort Collins. I work for a small little nonprofit called Trees, Water, and People. I'm the Indigenous Lands Program Director for the organization, where we work with multiple communities, Indigenous communities across the Americas, here in the United States, as well as Central and Latin America. But yeah, today I'm here to present about the project that our organization has been involved with other stakeholders and constituents across, the regional footprint of the Southwest. But just for quick context, as well, Trees, Water, and People, pretty sure most of you have never heard of us. We've been in Colorado now for 25 years. We do a lot of post-fire restoration, watershed science, fire ecology work predominantly. We're starting to slowly get into the mix of what agroforestry and sustainable agriculture, regenerative agriculture means to Indigenous communities. But before I begin, I first want to open up the land acknowledgement. Trees, Water, and People respectfully acknowledges that our office in Fort Collins, Colorado, sits on the living homelands of the Arapaho, Ute, Cheyenne, and other Native groups and peoples who still reside and depend on this land today. Every presentation, if it's formal or informal, our organization makes it a priority to open up with the land acknowledgements because we know that this land here was once stewarded by these groups of people. And we've come to the opportunity today to be able to continue that stewardship work and continue the informed passage of knowledge and transformation of what can be done moving forward. So a quick background of our project. The Southwest Tribal Agroforestry Project, aims to promote and revitalize traditional agroforestry practices utilized by tribes in the Southwest United States. The project works in conjunction with tribal producers, communities, individuals to really revitalize and reintroduce centuries-old traditional agroforestry practices that may have been lost or that may have been misused over time, by highlighting these efforts that uplift cultural relevance of agroforestry practices. So it was really great to hear about all the different projects that are happening in the urban settings, in the rural areas, even going up to the federal system of funding, because I think this all our project ties and connects all of it together, because there's a lot of information that we've learned from our team just by being able to participate in this project. So we had 3 key deliverables that are, come forth from this project. The first one was to really produce 3 case study videos and information sheets on tribal-led agroforestry projects through 3 different case study participants. So I'm going to quickly just backtrack and say our project was not really focused on the technical aspects of agroforestry, of what to plant, where to plant, when to plant. It's more focused on that social community impact of elevating those voices and what they're doing locally or place-based in their communities or in their region. So yeah, the first deliverable was producing 3 case studies, which I will go over the participants here shortly. And we actually just wrapped up our second case study participant, through a film production, which has been pretty awesome. Our second key deliverable is to produce a synthesis and literature review of what these practices and these methodologies mean to Indigenous tribal communities across the Southwest. We know that the 3 case studies are not representing all the tribes or the communities across the region, because one of the biggest myths is that tribes are monolithic, and we are not. So each community that we get to work with has a different form of definition of agroforestry, how they connect to the land, what's their origin story, how they use these food systems or food forests directly into their communities. But what we're trying to do is synthesize the 3 case studies, the information that we get to collect, and really produce some type of a formal report or formal manual that will be accessible to everyone publicly. And then our last key deliverable was to boost webinars and podcasts highlighting tribal agroforestry and civil pasture projects in the Southwest. I know we've been working with SWAAN to, start doing that this summer and hopefully down the road as well. So it's really been great to see all three key deliverables starting to mesh and align collectively together on this project. Our primary audience for this project was Indigenous communities and groups interested in practicing agroforestry. There's a wide range of communities across just the Southwest footprint who are really looking forward to get back into this practice, or looking to start a nonprofit or that's focused on agroforestry, but just don't know how to get started or don't have the resources. So this project is hoping to really boost, like the experiences and provide information that's coming from our 3 case study participants to be channeled over to these communities and individuals who are looking to start an agroforestry program, project, garden, etc. But we also have a secondary audience, just the general public, individuals, groups like you all who are interested to maybe understand more about the concept of tribal agroforestry, what it means to them, how do they approach it, how do they get their funding, how do they create collaborations, partnerships. So that's where the secondary audience really comes in as well for this project. Yeah, we have a big conglomerate of project partners, working collectively together on this. Quivero Coalition out of New Mexico is the one spearheading this project and effort. They're the ones who received the funding from the USDA National Agroforestry Center, if I believe I'm right. Yep. So they're the ones who gave us a 2-year grant to really focus on uplifting and elevating Indigenous perspectives in agroforestry, because they realized they don't have none of that information on their website or information through resources. So what we're building today is actually going to live on their website once the project wraps up, which is going to be at the end of October of this year. So yeah, it's been great to really work with USDA, been super flexible. There's a lot of calls we had to get on with them regarding, working with tribes, because for the individuals we work with, this is their first time ever doing it. So, every opportunity, collaboration is a little different. So it was a learning lesson for all of us. But yeah, SWAAN as well. I see a lot of familiar faces in this room, through Zoom calls. It's great to see you all here, in an organic body and not in a computer. So, but yeah, it was just great to see, how all these different groups, communities have come together to really focus and work with each other on this project. So our first case study that I'll go through and talk about is the Santa Ana Native Plant Nursery. It's located in Santa Ana Pueblo, New Mexico. It's one of the 19 pueblos. They are one of, very few Native American owned operated nurseries in the country. So for them, they are creating a model. They are creating something that, is transformative especially for Native Indigenous communities, because for a long time, Native communities were always thought of there can be no economic development, no economic growth, no opportunity to, bring and uplift resources for them to start doing these type of operational mechanisms. So for Santa Ana, what we really focused on with their case study and the film was their operation. How did they get funding? How did they start off the nursery? Who are their clients? How do they, go into contracts with Forest Service, BLM, Park Service, because the majority of their clientele are those federal agencies, doing restoration, reclamation projects across the Southwest. But in the nursery specifically, they have 3 main nursery practices or focus areas. One of them is the riparian restoration. So looking at always, bringing back traditional and, native plants back to the bosque of the Rio Grande River, but as well as across the landscape of New Mexico. Forest farming, I mentioned a little bit about that term, it's very broad. It can mean many different things. But for the tribal Indigenous peoples that we got to talk with, forest farming for them was, really going back into that bosque area, identifying their native plants, and then starting to realize or start to do some inventory of what's left and what can be replanted or regenerated. And then lastly is the traditional plant production. They are a big component of reproducing and planting a lot of traditional melons, chilies, corns, and also starting to look at investing into a seed bank. collecting and storing seed that has been, in people's houses, just hanging from their roof for, centuries, and actually trying to cool it so that, in 100 years, those seed can be viable again. So it's really great to hear, what this operation, again, being a very like one of a kind, tribally owned, managed nursery to be able to do all this great work. So this is going to be one of the webinars products that will be coming out for SWAAN, hopefully soon. We've been having some issues with the nursery manager scheduling a call with him, but we're hoping that this story will be coming to you all soon through either if it's through the National Agroforestry Center website or through the SWAAN webinars. The second case study was the Santa Clara Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute. This one, they focus and are featuring the traditional agroforestry importance. So really bringing it back to what traditional agroforestry methods and, practices mean to that community specifically. The Santa Clara Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute is a nonprofit. It's very small. It has a educational learning center, but it also has this food forest that we had the opportunity to walk through with Roxanne Swensel. She, talked about the importance of how her people in the community have collected, certain berries, fruits, nuts, that were local to that landscape, and how climate change is starting to affect the harvesting routine or pattern of those specific trees. Where is it located? It's in Santa Clara, Pueblo, New Mexico, so 45 minutes north of Santa Fe. Yeah. So, and then again, she talked about forest farming, traditional agroforestry practices, windbreaks, which was, very surprising to hear how her house is in the middle of this, little food forest. But, for her, she said during the winter, it keeps her house nice and warm. And in the summer, it keeps her house nice and cold. So she was talking about how in the past, her community and other communities in the northern New Mexico area will build their houses around a lush forest area because that's how they were able to survive the harsh winters and stay cool during the summer. So it was really great to hear about how the natural building of adobe intermixing and connecting with the food forest made sense in this landscape. But then lastly, the civil pasture, we went to go explore and visit the learning center that they had there, and they had a common today's common civil pasture concept of line or row crops of fruit trees with some lush grass. I think it was, I can't remember the grass species, but anyways, it was a place where they were trying to pilot and bring in local ranchers so that their sheep and their goats can graze that area, but still be available to produce a lot of the apples and oranges that were local to that landscape. Our third case study is at Tewa Women United. What we're featuring with them in this project is the women and gender advocacy. They really highlighted how women play an important role in this practice. For the most part, we hear about men taking, the spearheading role or being the ones out there, doing the gardening and, all of this traditionally through, a lot of the tribal and indigenous communities. But for this group, a group of women who now have that nonprofit organization, Tewa Women United, they talked about what they learned from their grandmas, the stories of the maternal role in this practice, which was very beautiful and strong. Me being from that region too, I never heard about it until I went to go visit this unique place. Some of the practices that they value within their organization is environmental justice. So access back to land, access back to certain areas where they can harvest and collect certain, berries, nuts, medicinal uses. So this group actually has a memorandum of agreement with the city of Espanola, New Mexico, where they have what they call the healthy food oasis on an uphill slope part of the city, where they use that space to bring the next generation of leaders and the non-tribal folks together to discuss certain and important issues of social equity and impact. That goes along with healing justice. Native American women have one of the highest rates of domestic violence. And so they're using this place of an agroforestry civil pasture concept to bring a healing purpose back to Native women, a place where they can feel safe and, their voices could be heard. So it was really strong and powerful to be able to be there with them that day and listen to why the organization exists and how agroforestry plays a much deeper role in just, the production cycles through, the harvesting, et cetera, et cetera. So this is our third case study that, we're highlighting as part of our project. Just quick project highlights and lessons learned, from, as, we move forward in this project is, amplifying and revitalizing tribal agroforestry practices. So it's really reconnecting those past lessons and trying to connect it with the future. Like, how can we move forward by utilizing a lot of those centuries old practices that, at once were sustainable and we're able to live in coexistence and harmony with the land and applying it in today's agroforestry methods. And then one of the lessons that we learned is that, traditional agroforestry knowledge is wider than conventional agroforestry practices. It's, diversity of practices of sustenance, economic production, ceremonial use, self-healing, a place for migratory birds, even animals to come and really reconnect to that community and to that landscape. So it was one of the biggest lessons we learned was we came in very narrow-minded into the project and thinking that we're just going to get a basic definition. We're just going to get like, this is what we're planting, this is what we're doing. But instead, we're walking out of this with so much knowledge and so much information that, again, has a wider net of what traditional agroforestry methods mean to these communities. One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, that I thought would be great to highlight is, why it's important to learn and respect tribal processes, because we were on continuous multiple calls within the National Agroforestry Center regarding how come we haven't got the logo yet? How come, we can't produce the video? It's like the tribes are sovereign nations. There's a protocol, there's a process that you have to follow to be able to work with them. Because once you follow and, respect those local tribal ethics and processes, it leads to more honest long-term relationships. And I remember Crane mentioned that earlier in his talk too, the only way you can work with Indigenous communities is being transparent and honest and not forcing things. And so this was just a few examples that we learned and picked up from this project specifically, and relaying it back to the National Agroforestry Center is, there's not paperwork, there's just multiple rounds of conversations. There has to be a memorandum of agreement. There has to be, protection of sovereignty of both land and knowledge that takes place before you start filming, or capturing these observations from the communities. So it was really great feedback, for them to learn as they move forward in this area of working with tribal communities. This is my final slide, just, for the next steps of what we're doing. We are in the final stages of our case study video editing. So our filmographer is, doing nonstop work of trying to get this all ready to go by the end of August, because the funder, NAC, wants, something solid by then, so they can start putting it on their website by October. We're also finalizing synthesis papers and information sheets. We're thankful to work with a few graduate PhD level students who are doing a lot of the synthesis and the coding of what the information we're collecting from these communities. We're looking forward to collaborate with SWAAN again for future webinars, not just a part of this project, but other projects moving forward. I think there's a lot that we can all learn from tribal communities, Indigenous groups, nonprofits who are doing this type of work. And then lastly is just, why stop now? Like, I know our funding is going to exhaust soon, but there's a lot of funding out there that, I think we can really come together and start expanding and replicating these projects with different communities across the Southwest or even across the entire country. But yeah, that's all I have. I just want to make a quick note too. So Leah Potter-White, she is the project manager. She works with the Quivira Coalition. Her and I, have been part of this project since day one. but she has more of the administrative information with like the relationship with the National Agroforestry Center. But yeah, it's just been a great opportunity to work with her and others on this project as well. Thank you. Yeah, anyone have any questions?
Thank you, James, for a wonderful, deep presentation. Thank you for the nice round to SWAAN. And your last slide kind of answers my question, but I wondered if you could, because of Quivira leading this project, if you could give a little bit more background in Quivira and what they do.
Yeah.
Besides just simply, not simply, but only this particular project.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So from my knowledge, the Quivira Coalition is based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. They're not. Oh, repeat the question. I just saw that. So the question was, can I provide a little bit more context of who the Quivira Coalition is, what they do, and how the collaboration with my organization and them has been, going so far. So the Quivira Coalition they're based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think they've been around since about the same time as my organization is, so like the late 90s. They really focus a lot on grassland, rangeland, and sustainable agriculture. They work with a lot of private landowners, in the Southwest, but as well recently trying to get into more of the tribal engagement and collaboration form of it as well. This is our third project that we're working on with Quivira through Trees, Water, and People. Our first two were heavily focused on rangeland conservation and water conservation methods. So this was a unique opportunity for us to expand our own lands to, work with Quivira, because they have expertise in this, they have the staff, they have, a long track record of doing this type of work in the Southwest. But yeah, Leah is, that's her contact info if you ever want to, reach out to her. But Sarah, can't remember her last name. She's probably, if she sees this, she's going to be like, James, you should know my last name. She's the executive director of Quivira Coalition, and, but all of them are awesome. We have a really great relationship, partnership with that organization. Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to put a follow-up plug in with the Quivira Coalition there. A guy I was able to meet through them. I'm born and raised in New Mexico as well, but his name's Gordon Tooley, and he's up in True Trust, New Mexico. And they have a neat operation and focus particularly on growing fruit trees of unique varieties within the native soil there. And we've grown a few of them here at Chatfield Farm, but anyway, there's a lot of great people coming out of there, and that's one I always like to put in people's minds. So look up Tooley's trees.
Cool. Well, definitely do. No, thanks for that.
Would you repeat that? You are so friendly.
Yes, sorry.
Trees, right?
Tooley's Street. Yeah. What was her name?
My name's Eric.
Eric. Eric, just mentioned he's from New Mexico as well, and has a long, history and, known people in northern New Mexico. So he recommends looking up Truly's Trees. They're based out of True Trust, New Mexico, which, by the way, I highly recommend going down there if you're ever in that part of the state. It's very beautiful. But yeah, check them out.
Yeah, I am John Zamora from the National Institute of Agriculture, USDA. You mentioned in your slides about environmental justice. Can you elaborate a little bit more of that in the context of the tribal needs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the question was, if I can elaborate a little bit more on the concept of environmental justice and what it means or plays in our project. So, working with the 3 case study participants, their idea of environmental justice was not just the concept of like access back to the landscape, but, looking at how tribes can, really have a strong input and perspective towards the restoration and regeneration or even sustainability of these critical landscapes and ecosystems. But it also that, to extend more on that, that means, maybe going into certain types of MOAs of like co-stewardship, co-land management. And that's really common on the Forest Service side and the tribes, because one of the organizations or the case study participants, the Flowering Tree Permaculture Institute, is about to go into that type of agreement where that institution can provide certain expertise and certain knowledge that the Forest Service may find or may be able to incorporate into land management practices. So that's really where it is, but it also includes water justice. You know, like how tribes are senior water right holders. That's a big quotation. Senior water right holders. So like allowing them to start exercising that power more thoroughly, especially in the years of drought and in the arid Southwest. So that was another concept, you know, that we learned from the Santa Ana Native Plant Nursery, is that like the water district that oversees or manages that section where the reservation is located is constantly like your overuse of your water. You know, you got to start you know, cutting back so other farmers and other users downstream will have access to it. But for these tribes, you know, they've been in this landscape or these communities since, you know, since time immemorial, that they need to start exercising that water rights more thoroughly and using their power of sovereignty in that system.
Is there anything for food allocation, food security?
For food security, a little bit, you know, I think that kind of goes to where the idea of having access to harvest, having access to collect, because a lot of these, and it's not just for food, it's again for ceremonial use, like for the Pueblos, their livelihoods depend on the Douglas fir. So annually, each tribe will go and harvest that tree, you know, for ceremony, for dances, etc. So that kind of plays into that role of why tribes need to start having access back to ancestral lands, or be able to have co-management opportunities within that certain landscape, even if it's, you know, managed by Forest Service, BLM, Park Service, whoever. That's part of that environmental justice, is that tribes should, first of all, they should get the land back, but they should have access to those certain areas for harvesting.
Awesome.
James,
Yeah.
this is Beverly on Zoom. I just want to make sure we don't forget that we've got people here that have questions as well. So can I just jump in and have Sarah ask a question?
Yeah, totally.
All right, Sarah, go ahead.
Hello, James. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I had the privilege a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, to visit Flowering Tree and to get to meet Roxanne Swensel and be on a workshop on the property and on the farm. And what I think was amazing about it is this, you know, beyond the urban, beyond the forestry part and the seed saving, it really feels like it's a complete holistic approach to life, right? Like the infrastructure, I think one of the greatest things they did was this Pueblo food experience, which they basically had a community of people of all ages really try to go back to a pre-contact diet and what that looks like on their health. And I thought that was fantastic. So my question to you is, are you finding that a lot of the indigenous communities that you're working with are not just thinking about like a small segment, but are really thinking about a lifestyle, a different way of just becoming closer to nature, closer to, you know, what they traditionally would have done in a modern kind of way? I'm wondering if that's the case with other projects. But again, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Yeah, no, thanks for that great question, Sarah. Yes, we are finding, you know, with like the communities that I work with through my organization specifically, who did not participate in this project, you know, are looking to really take that path of a holistic kind of regeneration or restoration of their cultural and community livelihoods. So that means, you know, establishing more gardens or establishing more programs for specifically for youth, because for a lot of these communities, language is like the center of, like, you know, their culture. And with the loss of language, you know, you can't really be able to connect with the land, with, you know, the natural elements of earth. So for a lot of these communities, language is a big component towards youth engagement, community outreach, but as well as, you know, trying to remove kind of like what they call the colonized diet of introduction of, you know, unhealthy fats, you know, foods, etc., by starting to re-engage and revitalize their connection to the land. So like for example, my community of Santo Domingo Pueblo, it's happening right now. We're seeing a lot of funding and resources coming in to establish these food forests, greenhouses, but also teaching you know, young native youth to understand the importance of farming, agroforestry techniques, because for the longest period of time, that was our livelihood as well. So yeah, that, hopefully that answers your question, Sarah, but no, I think that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm wondering, and knowing that practitioners and tribes are not a monolith by any means. What kinds of things have you heard from folks about what they need and want to thrive? Like I'm thinking about like all the people in this room and like, is it more eyeballs and awareness? Is it money? Is it land? Is it things that like to push this forward? What have you heard from people on the ground?
Yeah, a lot of it is really, so the question is what tribes and indigenous like nonprofits groups need in terms of support from like the non-tribal groups. So the big one is always the capacity. You know, I think even for maybe some of us in this room, capacity is a big burden and big issue as well. But for them, it's, you know, they have like maybe one person wearing 3 or 4 or even more hats, you know, like they're the field technician, they're the volunteer coordinator, but it's always that idea of like getting more and more people from that community specifically to engage in that type of work. Because not only does it, you know, help promote like and transfer that knowledge of traditional agroforestry knowledge, but it creates economic development. It keeps that money within that community versus bringing someone outside to do contract work or hiring labor from the outside. So that's always the biggest component. But then the second thing is unrestricted funding. You know, because the timelines between tribes and how the government system, if it's federal, state, local, they don't always match up. You know, there's always shifts in priorities for tribes. Like we just had a drought, we just had a fire. Like last year, New Mexico was ablaze, you know, from the state's biggest fire. So like communities had to shift, but that grant period was still on the same clock. So that was another big thing, is like, how can we start rewriting the narrative of, you know, how funding to tribes can be more flexible and unrestricted, so that gives more autonomy to that organization or that community to be like, you know, we really need to hire someone else, but this grant money won't allow personnel hiring, etc. But then the third thing we always listened to was infrastructure. You know, a lot of the funding that these organizations do get is very limited in infrastructure and expansion. So for case point in the Flowering Tree Hill Permaculture Institute, they want to build a seed bank, a nice, you know, up to date, or what they call state of the art cooling system. So seed can be stored, they're native seed, but they don't have the funding to really build that bank within their property just yet. Right now, they're working with Santa Ana, but Santa Ana is also starting to get to capacity on the cooling bank. So those are just the 3 common ones that we hear from at least these case study participants. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, if any